The world does not dispense fairness, and the moment you internalize this brutal, inescapable reality is the moment you transcend victimhood. Look around you, right now, as you consume this content. Someone of inferior intellect wields more respect. An individual of lesser competence commands greater influence. A person with fewer inherent skills than you is living the life you covet, purely because they comprehend the dark psychology of human nature. You have been systematically programmed to abide by a rule book that others discarded long ago. You were conditioned to be passive and nice, while your competitors became intensely strategic. You were taught to wait patiently for respect, while the powerful simply took it. The game is, in fact, rigged. But the rigging is not random. It is engineered against those who actively refuse to learn the true rules. It is stacked against those who cling to the juvenile fantasy that fairness exists. It is weighted against those who believe good intentions are a substitute for psychological dominance. 5 centuries past, Niccolo Machiavelli meticulously decoded the hidden mechanics of influence and power. He articulated precisely why the so-called good men inevitably fail, and why ruthless strategists ascend to world governance. Today, I will transmit 8 dark psychological principles that will fundamentally reforge you from an overlooked entity into a dangerously confident, untouchable, and utterly unforgettable force. But heed this final critical warning. Once your eyes are opened to the true matrix of human psychology, the illusion can never be restored. Once you grasp these principles, the option of playing the victim becomes permanently unavailable. The awakening, from invisible to invincible, allow me to share the crucible moment that shattered my own naivete. I embodied the intelligent, hard-working man who possessed every correct answer, yet commanded zero audience. I was intelligent, genuinely competent, and utterly invisible. I witnessed contemptible, overconfident fools securing promotions I deserved. I observed manipulative individuals constructing empires while honest people withered in struggle. I watched charismatic sociopaths effortlessly attract hordes of followers while decent men dined in solitude. It was then I apprehended the one truth no one dares to articulate. The world does not compensate intelligence. It compensates influence. It does not revere a good heart. It respects a strong presence. It cares nothing for your internal character. It demands psychological dominance. This realization vaporized my naive worldview. But simultaneously, it liberated me from a lifetime shackled by frustration and obscurity. Machiavelli's survival was predicated on this understanding. He existed within the Renaissance furnace of Italian politics, a world defined by betrayal, calculated intrigue, and constant psychological warfare. He saw kingdoms rise and dissolve based on one immutable principle. Those who grasp human psychology rule those who do not. His lessons are not dusty historical footnotes. They are the definitive operating manuals for anyone determined to cease being manipulated and to start becoming magnetic. Ruthlessness is not synonymous with cruelty. Ruthlessness is psychological sophistication. It is the awareness that while you are timidly playing checkers with noble intentions, your rivals are playing chess with cold, calculated moves. Prove you're ready. Drop this declaration into the comments section. I refuse to be controlled by others. This is not a mere comment. It is your declaration of war. It is the inaugural stride toward your psychological sovereignty. Every lesson that follows demands one fundamental, irrevocable transformation: the shift from a victim mindset to a predator mindset. Are you prepared to become dangerously, unquestionably confident? Let us commence. 8 dark psychological principles of dominance. Number 1. Fairness is the lie of the powerful. Here is the first, most brutal truth you must assimilate. Fairness is a calculated deception manufactured to keep you compliant and weak. Every moment you spend anticipating fair treatment, another player is strategically seizing what you desire. Every instance you adhere to imaginary unwritten rules, others are re-engineering the entire game for their sole benefit. Every time you expect reciprocity, manipulative actors are exploiting your predictable behavior. You have been conditioned to believe that acting fairly equates to nobility. The reality, it designates you as the prey. Reflect on your own history. How often have you granted respect to someone who offered you none? How many times have you extended help to an individual who never reciprocated? How many occasions have you waited your turn while others brazenly cut the line? This is not fate or bad luck. This is the consequence of being psychologically programmed to fail. Machiavelli observed, "Men should either be treated generously or destroyed, because they take revenge for slight injuries. For heavy ones they cannot." This axiom transcends physical violence. It speaks to psychological warfare. If you merely wound a person's ego, a slight injury, they will relentlessly plot their revenge. If you psychologically dominate them completely, a heavy injury, they have no option but to accept their subordinate position and retreat. The fundamental error most people make is the reliance on half measures. They offer weak pushback against dominant personalities. They establish soft, permeable boundaries with aggressive individuals. They attempt to reason with those whose actions are dictated by pure, unadulterated self-interest. This strategy yields the worst possible outcome. You appear weak and simultaneously cultivate enemies who perceive you as an easy target for eventual defeat. Psychological dominance manifests as follows. When disrespect is shown, you do not engage in argument or offer explanations. You simply and swiftly demonstrate through action that disrespecting you carries immediate and severe social consequences. You do not attempt to convince people to treat you with greater regard. You engineer situations where showing you respect serves their self-interest, and treating you poorly results in a meaningful cost of something they value. Stop applying a code of fairness to those who abandon it for their gain. Start becoming intensely strategic with people who respond only to the calculus of power. Number 2. Ruthlessness is the art of self-control. The masses mistake ruthlessness for uncontrolled rage or lashing out. They are profoundly mistaken. True ruthlessness is the absolute inverse. It is ice-cold, emotional discipline. Ruthless individuals do not become angry. They become strategic. They do not react emotionally. They respond calculatedly. Their decisions are never born from wounded pride or hurt feelings. They emerge from a logical assessment of the action that best serves their core interests. This is precisely why emotionally reactive people are incapable of building durable influence. They are entirely predictable. They can be manipulated effortlessly by anyone who identifies their emotional triggers. They instantly surrender their power the moment someone causes them to lose their composure. Psychologically dominant individuals grasp that emotions are information, not instructions. They register the feeling, anger, disappointment, frustration, but they refuse to allow it to control their subsequent actions. Consider a scenario. Someone publicly attempts to undermine your reputation or embarrasses you. The emotionally reactive person immediately becomes defensive, argues, or tries to justify their position. This response reveals weakness and validates the attacker's power. The ruthlessly disciplined person operates differently. They internally register the attack, acknowledge the raw emotion, and then pivot to a strategic question. what exact response will be most permanently damaging to this person's social standing while simultaneously elevating mine. Perhaps they elect to ignore the attack entirely, a supreme demonstration that the attacker is beneath their energy. Perhaps they respond with a cold, surgical factual correction that exposes the attacker's folly. Or perhaps they simply use the moment to showcase their superior, unflappable composure. The critical factor is this: their response is a calculated choice, not a triggered reflex. Machiavelli understood this imperative for decisiveness. Injuries should be inflicted all at once, so that their ill's savor, being less lasting, may give less offense. In psychological application, this means when you are compelled to respond to an attack, your action must be decisive and final. Do not participate in prolonged, draining emotional drama. Do not allow yourself to be dragged into an emotional back and forth. Execute one calculated maneuver that terminates the conflict definitively in your favor. Think of the most psychologically formidable people you know. Do they regularly lose their temper? Do they engage in shouting matches? Do they permit others to control their emotional state? The answer is an emphatic no. They maintain emotional sovereignty. They carefully select their battles. They respond from a position of strategy, never from feeling. This absolute emotional discipline is the source of tremendous psychological power. When others realize they are incapable of manipulating your emotions, they are forced to treat you with caution and respect. Master your emotional responses. Let the amateur masses react, while you, the strategist, coolly respond. Number 3. Dominance is a stronger drive than affection. This truth will shatter any lingering people-pleasing programming you may harbor. Being respected is an infinitely more valuable currency than being liked. When people merely like you, they feel emboldened to take risks with your feelings based on the assumption that you are guaranteed to forgive them. When people respect your psychological strength, they will calculate their moves twice before ever crossing you, because they know with certainty that there will be consequences. Likeable people are safe. They are predictable. They are easy to exploit because everyone knows they lack the capacity for meaningful retaliation. Psychologically dominant people are dangerous. They are unpredictable. They are treated with extreme caution because everyone knows they possess the will and capacity to defend their vital interests. Look within your own social circles. Who commands the most genuine respect? The kindest person or the person with the unshakable presence? Who do people actually consult before making critical decisions? The person who agrees with everyone or the one whose approval is a meaningful hurdle? Machiavelli was starkly unambiguous on this matter. It is much safer to be feared than loved if one has to lack one of the two. This is not a mandate to become a tyrant. It is a mandate to become an individual others know they cannot disrespect without enduring demonstrable consequences. It is the cultivation of a reputation for being fair, yet fundamentally formidable. Observe how this dynamic functions in practice. Likeable people habitually say yes to requests they resent, motivated by the fear of causing disappointment. Dominant people utter no without a trace of guilt, prioritizing the defense of their own interests. Likeable people absorb disrespect and merely hope it will stop. Dominant people confront disrespect immediately and decisively. Likeable people strive to be included in every activity. Dominant people are highly selective about what warrants their presence. Likeable people constantly explain and justify their decisions. Dominant people simply make decisions and expect others to adapt. The psychological shift from seeking likability to achieving dominance is profound. You must cease asking, "Will they like me if I do this?" You must begin asking, "Will this action increase or decrease my social power?" Stop striving to make everyone comfortable. Become comfortable with the discomfort of others when that discomfort serves your strategic interests. Stop seeking approval. Become the person whose approval others desperately seek. This is not a path to becoming a bully. It is a path to becoming an individual whose respect must be earned, rather than someone who dispenses respect freely to those who do not value it. Build psychological dominance through the consistent, unyielding demonstration of your boundaries and standards. Let others compete fiercely for your approval, rather than competing for theirs. Number 4. Decisive action commands obedience. This is the point where most people systematically destroy their own influence. They prioritize making weak, repetitive moves over rare, powerful ones. Psychologically weak people constantly issue threats of consequences they never execute. They deliver multiple warnings that ultimately train others to ignore them completely. They attempt to exert control through emotional manipulation, nagging, or pleading. This cultivates a devastating reputation. Everyone knows you are all bark and zero bite. People learn to dismiss your complaints because your warnings are wholly devoid of actual power. Psychologically dominant people adhere to a different doctrine. They issue fewer warnings, but when they finally act, their actions are decisive, memorable, and final. Machiavelli observed, "If an injury has to be done to a man, it should be so severe that his vengeance need not be feared." In psychological terms, this means that when you are compelled to demonstrate power, that demonstration must be so clear and absolute that the memory of it eliminates any desire to test you again. Consider a precise example. An individual in your circle consistently disrespects you, interrupting, dismissing your opinions, and using you as the subject of jokes. The psychologically weak response involves repeatedly asking them to stop, becoming frustrated, or complaining about their behavior to others. This merely reinforces their dominance, as they see they can affect your emotional state with no real cost. The psychologically dominant response is utterly different. You silently register the pattern, and then you act once and decisively. Perhaps you publicly and surgically call out their behavior in a way that generates social embarrassment. Perhaps you exclude them from a valuable activity or resource. Perhaps you leverage your social power to turn others against their behavior. The critical element is that your response is disproportionately strong relative to any single incident, but perfectly proportionate to the overall long-term pattern of disrespect. This creates a profound psychological impact. Others instantly recognize that disrespecting you carries a high cost. They see that you are not one who issues empty threats. When you act with force and finality. This principle extends across all domains of influence. Instead of continuously trying to convince people of your value, you occasionally demonstrate it so powerfully that the lesson becomes permanent. Instead of being constantly available and helpful, you are occasionally unavailable in a way that forces others to realize they need you more than you need them. Instead of arguing your position ad nauseum, you take actions that render your position undeniable. Issue fewer threats, but when you act, follow through completely. Build a reputation defined by decisive action, not empty warnings. Number 5. Perception management is reality control. This is the zenith of sophisticated psychological influence. The understanding that others' perception of you is more important than the objective reality of who you actually are. Most people commit the error of focusing entirely on being good, under the naive assumption that others will automatically recognize their inherent value. Human psychology is not designed this way. People lack the time or inclination to investigate your character deeply. Their judgment relies on snap judgments, surface signals, and social proof. If you fail to actively manage how others perceive you, someone else, a competitor or adversary, will inevitably manage it for you and never in your favor. Machiavelli encapsulated this perfectly. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. For the vast majority of people you encounter, your image is their reality. Your reputation is your power. Your perceived value is in the marketplace of minds, your actual value. Psychologically sophisticated individuals understand this and actively sculpt their image. They seize control of the narrative about who they are before others can create a negative one. This is not about being disingenuous. It is about being strategic in the presentation of your authentic, valuable qualities. Consider social media. Two people achieve the identical success. One strategically documents the success, showcasing their competence. The other remains silent, assuming their work speaks for itself. The one who managed their perception will receive more recognition, opportunity, and respect. In face-to-face interactions, this translates to understanding that your body language, voice tone, clothing, and social confidence communicate your value before you articulate a single word. Walk into a room with a confident posture, maintain direct eye contact, and speak with authority, and people will unconsciously categorize you as important. Slouch, avoid eye contact, and speak tentatively, and people will unconsciously dismiss you as unimportant. The psychological principle is stark. People treat you precisely according to how you train them to see you. Perception management in practice requires narrative control, strategically sharing your successes while downplaying your failures to control the stories others hear. Association, aligning yourself with high-value people and activities to elevate your status by proximity. Mystery, maintaining a degree of mystery about yourself, ensuring people fill in the blanks with positive assumptions rather than knowing all your weaknesses. Projection, projecting confidence even when you feel uncertain, because confidence is contagious and uncertainty is repulsive. Your reputation is your most critical asset. Protect it, cultivate it, and leverage it strategically. Number 6. Narrative control is psychological warfare. This is the ultimate power maneuver, controlling not just the events that transpire, but how those events are interpreted and ultimately remembered. Every situation possesses multiple frames. The same action can be interpreted as leadership or arrogance, as confidence or selfishness, as strength or aggression. The person who controls the narrative controls the meaning. Most people fixate entirely on their actions and fatally ignore the story being told about those actions. This is a catastrophic error. In human psychology, the story frequently overrides the facts. Think of any conflict you have observed. The individual who tells their version first and most persuasively inevitably wins the court of public opinion, irrespective of the actual truth. Machiavelli observed, "Men in general judge more from appearances than from reality." People lack the time for thorough investigation. They rely on the simplified story received from trusted sources. Whoever controls that story controls popular belief. This demands that you become highly proficient at framing your actions in a way that consistently serves your interests. When you succeed, you control the story of how you succeeded. When you fail, you control the story of what you learned. When others attack you, you control the counter-narrative. Narrative warfare in practice includes Framing difficult decisions. When executing an unpopular decision, you frame it in terms of long-term principles rather than immediate self-interest. Reversal. When someone attempts to discredit you, you don't merely defend, you reframe their attack as evidence of their own jealousy or inherent weakness. Highlighting strategy. When achieving a significant goal, you tell the story in a manner that emphasizes your strategic thinking and character, not just luck. Let's use a concrete example. You cut ties with a toxic friend who drains your energy. They may spin a tale that you're heartless and abandon them. If you fail to control this narrative, you will be perceived as cruel. But if you proactively frame the story, I had to establish boundaries with someone who was eroding my mental health and refused basic friendship reciprocity, you are perceived as someone who values themselves appropriately. The same action, a completely different perception. Advanced narrative control requires the anticipation of negative interpretations, allowing you to preemptively get ahead of them before they take hold. Always consider not just what you're doing, but how what you're doing will be perceived and discussed. Shape the story before others shape it for you. Number 7. Systematic consequences create psychological authority. The most sophisticated form of influence transcends mere emotion, threats, or simple manipulation. It is predicated on establishing predictable systems where specific behaviors automatically generate specific corresponding outcomes. This is psychological mastery because it intentionally removes your personality from the equation. People cannot argue with a system the way they argue with a personal decision. They cannot manipulate automatic consequences the way they manipulate emotional responses. When your authority hinges on threats or getting angry, you give adversaries control over your power. They can intentionally push your buttons, manipulate your emotions, and negotiate with your reactions. But when you establish systems where respect automatically leads to access and disrespect automatically leads to exclusion, you maintain absolute psychological control. Machiavelli grasped this necessity. A wise ruler should rely on what is in his own control, not on what is in the control of others. Systematic authority in practice means passive enforcement. Instead of arguing with people who waste your time, you simply become unavailable when they need you. Reciprocal investment. Instead of getting angry at those who exploit your generosity, you quietly redirect your valuable help only toward those who demonstrate appreciation. Benefit alignment. You engineer situations where treating you well is inherently beneficial to them and treating you poorly is inherently costly. Consider a specific example. You have friends who expect you to plan all social activities, but they consistently cancel late or show up tardy. The emotionally reactive approach involves frustration, complaining, and sending guilt trips. The systematically authoritative approach is simple. I plan activities for people who confirm attendance and arrive on time. If a pattern of cancellation or tardiness emerges, you simply stop including them in the planning process. You do not announce this as a punishment or threat. You implement it as a natural, undeniable system. Those who value your effort receive more access. Those who waste your effort receive less. This builds psychological authority because people are compelled to modify their own behavior simply to maintain access to the value you provide. They cannot argue with the system because it is based on logical consequences, not emotional reactions. The greatest strength of this methodology is that it is self-maintaining. You are freed from the necessity of constantly enforcing rules or reminding people of your boundaries. The natural consequences perform the difficult work for you. Establish systems where others' behavior toward you automatically dictates their access to your value. Let natural consequences become the true teacher of how people should treat you. Number 8. The mind's fear of the unspoken. Here is the final, most essential lesson. True psychological dominance operates in absolute silence. Individuals who constantly boast about how tough, smart, or ruthless they are rarely possess any of those qualities. They are merely advertising a desired trait rather than demonstrating actual control. Real power does not need to announce itself. Real influence functions meticulously behind the scenes. Real psychological dominance is felt viscerally, never declared verbally. The most dangerous people in any environment are often the most quiet. They are observing while others are performing. They are calculating while others are reacting. They are positioning while others are merely posturing. Think of the most psychologically powerful individuals you have encountered. Do they habitually remind you of their power? Do they threaten people who cross them? Number. Their power is assumed, not announced. Their influence is demonstrated through results, not declarations. Their dominance is communicated through presence, not through words. Machiavelli illustrated this duality perfectly. The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. Therefore, one must therefore be a fox to recognize traps and a lion to frighten wolves. This mandates that you be strategically cunning when circumstances require guile, and psychologically forceful when circumstances demand strength. The key is the seamless, invisible transition between these two modes without ever telegraphing your strategy. In practical terms, this ensures competitors do not perceive your decisive moves until it is entirely too late to counter them. Allies do not grasp how you are positioning them until they suddenly realize they have benefited immensely from your foresight. Enemies do not realize you are undermining them until their sphere of influence has already collapsed. Silent dominance looks like this. You build influence without ever declaring your ambitions. You position yourself strategically without ever making your true strategy obvious. You gather information about everyone else while revealing minimal information about yourself. You cultivate alliances that serve your interests without making the alliance visible to your competitors. You undermine those who work against you without them ever knowing the source of their decline. This is not about being fundamentally dishonest. This is about understanding that strategic discretion is monumentally more powerful than tactical transparency. When you operate with silent dominance, people begin to experience your power without understanding how you acquired it. This renders your influence seemingly natural and inevitable rather than calculated and aggressive. Build your psychological empire quietly. Let the weak make noise while you execute strategic moves. Demonstrate power through results, never through premature announcements. The final choice: player or pawn. Here is the ultimate, inescapable truth that will determine your future. If you choose not to master the dark psychology of human influence, someone who has mastered it will seize control of your life. This is not an academic debate. It is psychological warfare occurring around you every single day. Right now, at this very moment, people are deploying these exact principles against those who remain willfully ignorant. Manipulative actors are exploiting those who cling to a childish belief in fairness. Psychologically dominant individuals are securing positions of superiority over those who value good intentions above strategic thinking. The choice is brutal, yet beautifully simple. Become someone who understands and utilizes psychological influence, or remain someone who gets influenced and used by others. You have been conditioned to believe that the study of these principles makes you inherently bad. This conditioning is precisely what psychologically dominant people want you to believe. They desire for you to remain naive, predictable, and easy to manipulate, while they operate with a sophisticated, lethal understanding of the human psyche. Every single day you postpone implementing these lessons is another day a more ruthless person is building the influence and respect you desire. Every day you choose to remain merely nice instead of becoming strategically formidable is another day you freely hand psychological ammunition to those who interpret kindness as weakness. The world does not require more naive, nice guys who inevitably finish last. The world demands individuals who grasp psychological realities and utilize that understanding to construct lives of genuine influence and unshakable confidence. If these dark truths have awakened a primal drive within you, if you're permanently weary of being psychologically subjugated, then prove it now. Like this video to declare your readiness to abandon naivety. Share it with one person who desperately needs to understand that simple niceness, devoid of psychological strength, is merely weakness with good marketing. Subscribe, because these lessons are merely the foundation of your total transformation. From an overlooked entity to someone utterly impossible to ignore. Remember the declaration you made in the comments. No one will ever dominate me psychologically. Now, stop refusing and start dominating. The choice is yours, but you must choose quickly, because while you're still deciding whether to become psychologically dangerous people are already calculating what their next move against you will be.